she was sleeping in the Mafia boss's bed, but secretly takes orders from the exact man who murdered his wife. For 8 straight months, his glamorous girlfriend acted like the perfect, loving future stepmother. In reality, she was a cartel spy, crushing heavy doses of laxatives into drinks and plotting to kidnap Sadan, his deeply traumatized son. But she made one fatal mistake. She underestimated the quiet, observant hotel maid, who noticed absolutely everything. Let us step into the quiet dark together. Picture Dominic Vasari, to the streets. He is a terrifying architect of violence, but right now, he is nothing more than a broken father, brought to his knees across a heavy Persian rug. He desperately pleads with his 6-year-old son, Leo, begging the boy just to meet his eyes. But the child is lost in panic, hands clamped over his ears, screaming without making a single sound. Outside, an ambulance wails. It is a stark reminder that the most brutal battles we ever face happen behind our own closed doors, no matter how invincible we appear. Dominic burned through $2 million on 7 doctors, and nothing worked. Even his enforcers stand frozen at the door. Men who have ruined rivals for less, unable to move an inch. In the absolute center of this crushing meltdown, a housekeeper rolls her laundry cart past the open door. She does not ask questions or utter a single word. Instead, she simply grabs a soft white washcloth and twists the fabric into a little rabbit with long floppy ears. Incredibly, the panicked boy stops thrashing and goes entirely still. It reminds us that the quietest, simplest gestures often carry far more healing power than throwing endless money at a wounded heart. The maid gently sets the rabbit on the carpet a few feet away, sits back on her heels, and waits slowly. Leo crawls forward. He reaches out a shaking hand, touches the soft ear, and actually smiles. Dominic just lifts his head, absolutely terrified that breathing too loud will completely shatter this miracle. Dominic is completely stunned. His voice is a hollow crack when he asks who she is. The maid stands up, smooths her wrinkled apron, and straightens her name tag. She looks at this terrifying boss, says she is nobody, apologizes, and vanishes down the hall. Her tag reads Savannah, making $14.50 an hour. It reminds us that you truly never know who might walk into a room and completely change your fate. That fleeting moment sparked the bloodiest turf war Dominic ever fought, bringing him the only love he ever trusted. Now he sits at his desk on the 47th floor. He ignores his whiskey, obsessively rewatching the security footage on a loop. The towel, the rabbit, his boy smiling. 4 guards just stand by in heavy, suffocating silence. His secretary slides a folder across the desk and slips out like a ghost. The Vasari family controls the port, the casinos, and the city rackets. His father moved illegal drugs, but when Dominic took the throne, he cut out the darkest parts of the syndicate. It proves we are never doomed to repeat the toxic mistakes of our parents. We always hold the power to carve a better path, but choosing the right thing was not enough to keep his wife safe. 2 years ago, a stray bullet meant for Dominic ripped through their car. It struck Alina while she was desperately shielding their child. Little Leo watched his mother slip away, right there in the back seat. That agonizing, bloody trauma is exactly why the boy has not spoken a single word since that horrible night. Frankie Duca, his loyal right-hand man for 22 years, steps into the room. He ran a background check on the maid and swears she is clean, but Dominic remains suspicious. 7 elite doctors could not do what this girl managed in 30 seconds. Frankie reads the file. Savannah Reeves, 27. No criminal record. Her younger brother drowned in 2014 and her grandmother passed away last year. Dominic instantly clocks the connection, asking if the boy was autistic. The files are sealed, but Frankie found proof to confirm it. Dominic walks over to his massive window, staring out over the cold lights of Manhattan. It is a harsh reminder that you can hold all the wealth and power in the world, but it absolutely cannot buy the true peace your wounded soul needs. Dominic orders Frankie to bring her up tomorrow, warning him not to reveal who is asking, or she will run. Frankie asks what he should say. Dominic coldly replies to ask if she wants to keep her job. It is a ruthless move. To understand how a maid reached a traumatized kid when experts failed, we must jump back 19 years to Ohio. Savannah was just 8. Her mother walked out and her father only showed up to steal cash. All that remained was a tiny house, Grandma June, and her brother Thomas, who never spoke. Life deals some of us a brutal hand from the start, but those exact painful struggles build the deep empathy we need later on. Savannah was forced to grow up far too fast, sacrificing her childhood just to keep her fragile world from falling apart. Little Thomas was sensitive to the world. He hated the hum of fluorescent lights, ate only white foods, and despised clothing tags against his skin. The doctor slapped the word autism on his chart like a boring weather report. But Grandma June was an unstoppable force. She taught special education for 31 years and never flinched. She told young Savannah to always watch his hands instead of his eyes, because hands never lie. That is a massive lesson we all need. Sometimes, to truly understand someone, you must stop waiting for words and just watch their quiet actions. Savannah completely adapted. She learned to fold a washcloth into a little rabbit because Thomas refused to sleep without one. She learned to softly hum instead of sing, carving out a safe space just for him. Picture this crushing heartbreak. Savannah takes little Thomas to the pool. She watches him for an hour, but steps away for 4 minutes to buy a popsicle. 4 minutes, and the absolute worst happens, he drowns. She goes mute from the shock, drops out, and slings plates at a diner. Grandma June dies when Savannah is 24, leaving one final rule: do not let his death make you terrified of other kids. Savannah packs her broken life and escapes to New York. She wears a bracelet of his hair, carrying the raw weight of that day. Cut back to her at the hotel, sliding down the wall in the linen room, breaking down. Here is a vital life lesson. The heaviest guilt always stems from our smallest choices. But you simply cannot let the past anchor you in the dark forever. Shaking because she recognized the terrified look on that boy's face. It has haunted her nightmares for 11 years. She whispers to herself, apologizing to Tommy, swearing she is not walking away. This time, her coworker Maggie bursts in, demanding to know what she did to that man's son. Savannah panics, offering to quit, but Maggie drops a terrifying truth. Resign, sweetheart. The Don just asked for your name. Absolute chills. By 9 the next morning, an enforcer marches her through metal detectors into a shadowy office. Dominic stands by the window. Savannah instantly checks his hands, clean nails, and a heavy wedding ring he should have taken off years ago. Remember this lesson. Sometimes stepping directly into the fire is the only way to finally stop running from your own past. Listen to this tension. Dominic has calluses on his knuckles, the kind a man gets from destroying a heavy bag at 3 in the morning when demons will not let him sleep. He states she did something a team of doctors could not do, demanding to know how. Savannah plays it cool, saying she just folded a towel. The Don does not play games. He asks for her dead brother's name. Savannah freezes, asking if he looked into her past. Dominic admits he investigates everyone. He says Tumas' name, noting he died in 2014. He sits down at her eye level and drops a massive offer, $2,000 a week to be his son's companion. Savannah tries to back out, claiming she lacks a degree. The lesson here? True value is never about pieces of paper. It is about the raw empathy you carry. Dominic shuts her excuse down. He hired 7 experts, but his kid refuses to look at them. Savannah takes a breath and drops a bombshell. She refuses to take his money if she cannot deliver, and she knows what his family does. It is a hard pass. The enforcer Frankie stops breathing. Nobody has told the Don no to his face in 9 years. Dominic leans in, asking if she is afraid of him. Her response is ice cold. She states she is only afraid of what she does not know, and she does not know him. He respects her nerve and gives her 48 hours to decide. She walks out without a glance back. For the first time in 2 years, the boss feels curiosity instead of crushing grief. The lesson? Standing your ground always commands far more respect than bending the knee to sheer power. Inside her tiny apartment, the room shakes every time a train rips by outside. But you and I know a person gets used to any noise. Eventually, she sits on her bed and pulls out a heartbreaking old tin box. Inside is a faded photo of Thomas at the pool, his raggedy stuffed rabbit and a hospital bracelet. It is heavy, raw grief. She closes her eyes, flashing back to the last night her brother was alive. They were on the porch, and he gently traced a shape into her palm with his tiny finger. 2 long ears, and a round body. He never made eye contact, but that was his beautiful, quiet way of saying he loved her. Here is a profound life lesson to carry with you. Love does not always need loud words. Sometimes the quietest gestures carry the most massive emotional weight in our lives. Look at this together. For the first time in 6 months, the emotional dam breaks. Savannah collapses in tears. Her phone vibrates in the dark. It is Miss Maggie, demanding the truth. Savannah pours out the reality of the Mafia boss and his impossible offer. The silence is heavy enough to crush bone. When Maggie speaks, her words cut deep. Dominic is a dangerous man, but the boy is entirely innocent. She asks a profound question. If Savannah's lost son had lived, and a stranger was his only hope, would she not pray they said yes? She tells Savannah to set strict boundaries with no dirty cash. This leaves us with a powerful life lesson. You can never punish a child for the sins of their father. True compassion requires stepping into the dark to save someone entirely helpless. He lays down one final rule. If Savannah feels unsafe, she must call even at 3 a.m. At 7:15 sharp, Savannah phones Frankie, the enforcer. She accepts the job on 3 conditions. First, she keeps her hotel gig to stay grounded. Second, she demands exactly $600 a week, reported legally on a tax form. Frankie stammers in stunned disbelief. Her third condition carries the most weight. If little Leo shows an ounce of fear toward her, she walks away forever. Frankie goes dead silent, struck by profound respect. She is the first soul to negotiate a Mafia salary downward. This reveals a simple, meaningful life lesson. Your personal integrity is the strongest armor you will ever wear. When you refuse to be bought, no one can truly control you. Into the shadows with me. Frankie watches his ruthless boss crack a faint smile. Dominic has not smiled in 2 agonizing years. He hangs up the phone, locking Savannah in for Monday, but that fragile peace shatters instantly. The door swings open without a knock. In walks Camila, a former model clinging to the crime boss for 8 desperate months. She floats into the room, wearing a designer dress, flashing an empty smile, carrying expensive macarons for the traumatized child. On paper, she plays the perfect trophy wife, but we know better than to trust a beautiful mask. People can dress their demons in luxury, but a rotten core always reveals itself. This leaves us with a simple life lesson. Real beauty is found in how gently you hold the broken, never in the expensive things you buy. Notice how Camila ignores the ghost haunting the room. She never asks about Alina, the beloved wife Dominic buried. She simply kisses Jaw, asking if it wants to eat her pastries. Dominic is miles away. His mind is anchored to a memory of a humble woman quietly folding a towel. 20 minutes later, the illusion shatters. Out on the busy avenue, she drops the act. She pulls out a burner phone, texting an unknown number to complain the boss still refuses to touch her. The reply is chillingly brief, demanding patience. Meanwhile, across the river, Savannah sits in silence, tracing the edges of a faded photograph. This contrast offers a powerful life lesson. Real love means carrying the heaviest burdens, doing the quiet, selfless things to honor those we have deeply loved and lost. Anna has no idea that 2 floors beneath her, the fake girlfriend is frantically deleting dark dog text messages. When Monday morning arrives, Savannah steps out of the elevator. She brings no designer luggage. She carries a worn canvas tote bag, packed with plain washcloths, origami paper, and homemade slime she cooked on her stove. There are no flashy screens, just pure patience. Frankie guides her to a massive white door. He warns her the boy has been awake since 6, refusing food, and the crime boss is nearby if things go wrong. Savannah gives a calm, steady nod. She is not running from this fight. It proves a beautiful, simple life lesson. True power does not require vast wealth or social status. The greatest weapon you can bring to heal a broken soul is a genuinely kind, unwavering heart. Pushes the door open, revealing a nightmare of sterile grief. There is no warmth inside, just a blinding white walls, a flawless white rug, and cold hospital sheets. The bookshelf holds dense textbooks no child would read. There are no scattered toys, no messy drawings, no life. This room was built by a father terrified of feeling real emotion. In the corner, tiny Leo sits on a cushion, folding a scrap of paper into nothing. It shatters the heart to witness. Hovering right above him is Camila. Draped in cashmere, she drips with an artificial sweetness, suffocating his tiny space. We often forget a simple life lesson. True emotional safety can never be manufactured with hollow words and expensive gifts. It requires a gentle, genuine human presence to make a broken spirit feel secure. Camila pitches her voice way too high, screeching at the boy to say hello. The sound hits the room like a blaring alarm. Leo violently flinches, shrinking deeper into his corner. This is where Savannah proves her deep understanding of the human heart. She takes a slow breath, scanning the tense room. Camila is a walking disaster. Her tone is sharp, her movements are erratic, and she is choking the air with heavy perfume. Instead of forcing contact, Savannah executes a beautiful move. She ignores the terrified child. She simply sits down on the rug 3 meters away, pulls out pale blue origami paper, and calmly begins to fold. It reminds us of a simple life lesson. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a panicked soul is to sit in silence and give them the space to breathe. You and I have both met someone exactly like this. Camila turns towards Savannah, pasting on a plastic smile. She tries to flex a shallow psychology fact. She skimmed off the internet. Savannah is not having it without lifting her eyes from the paper. She cuts the woman off. Her tone is gentle, yet wrapped in unbreakable steel. She calmly tells Camila to leave the room for 30 minutes so the exhausted child can have peace. The fake smile shatters on Camila's face. She sputters a defensive excuse, but her cruel eyes drop to judge Savannah's cheap uniform, flat shoes, and scuffed watch. You can feel the venom dripping from her stare before she storms out, shutting the heavy door. It is a vital, simple life lesson. True class and inner grace have nothing to do with the price tag on your clothes. Tragic irony hanging in the air is heavy. Savannah has no idea this woman only visits the boy when the crime boss is home to witness the act, but here is the most agonizing detail. Camila's heavy perfume is the exact same scent the treacherous night nurse wore 2 years ago, the night little Leo was covered in blood and stopped speaking forever. His small body remembers the terror. Savannah is blind to this bloody history, but her instincts are flawless. She calmly turns off the harsh fluorescent lights and pulls back those suffocating heavy drapes. She lets the warm golden sunlight wash over the sterile room, chasing away the cold shadows. It is a simple life lesson for us all. Sometimes opening the blinds and letting the natural light in is the first step toward healing a shattered soul. Anna quietly settles back onto the rug and gets to work. She folds a tiny paper rabbit, a swan, a dog, and a frog, letting 30 minutes pass in silence. Then, she hears the faintest scrape of a cushion. She plays it cool, keeping her eyes down. Little Leo is crawling across the floor. He stops a meter away, mesmerized by the rhythmic motion of her hands. Gently, Savannah slides the paper rabbit across the rug. He does not grab it, but he does not flinch away either. Slowly, she begins to hum a deep, soothing tune she learned from her grandmother. It is a low, vibrating melody, the kind of pure, maternal sound that makes you feel safe in a terrifying world. It teaches us a simple life lesson. True human connection is rarely loud. It is built in the quietest, most patient moments of life. Stay with me here, because the emotional payoff is miraculous. The boy actually tilts his head, letting that soothing hum wash over his shattered nerves. An hour drifts by until Frankie taps on the door. Right at that exact second, the breakthrough happens. With one trembling hand, Leo bravely reaches out across the rug. He snags the paper rabbit and tucks it into his pajama pocket. Savannah does not make a spectacle of the moment. She simply offers a warm thank you and promises to return tomorrow. Leo stays silent, but as she leaves, his haunted eyes follow her every step. It provides a beautiful, simple life lesson. Genuine trust is built in quiet inches, never in loud miles. Meanwhile, poison is brewing. Camila has transformed a suite into a paranoid lair, glaring at a hidden security monitor. We are about to see just how deep this conspiracy goes. Camila watches the paper rabbit slide into the boy's pocket through the grainy security feed. Panic sets in. She grabs her burner phone, texting her contact that they have a new problem and must speed up their plans. Fast forward 2 weeks. Savannah is relentlessly showing up 4 mornings a week. She rides the subway, walks midtown, and heads up to the penthouse, always carrying that battered tote bag. The emotional progress is slow, but real. During their 3rd session, while quietly folding a blue swan, Leo reaches out and rests his tiny hand against hers for 3 whole seconds. Savannah keeps folding, totally unfazed, letting the boy guide the quiet moment. It proves a profound, simple life lesson. True devotion is simply about showing up day after day, until the frozen ice finally melts. Savannah remains perfectly silent, though beneath her calm surface, her heart is hammering a frantic rhythm. By their 5th session, the dynamic completely shifts. Without warning, little Leo walks to the shelf and pulls down a worn book about the ocean. It looks ordinary, except for a faded fingerprint on the bottom edge, the lingering touch of his late mother, Elena. A deep chill settles into Savannah. When Leo drops the book in her lap, she does not force him to read. She simply rides the wave. She turns the pages slowly, ignoring the letters, quietly naming the colors of the heavy blue water and the gray fish. She keeps the room anchored in total peace. Sometimes, the most profound healing happens when we just sit with someone in the quiet, demanding absolutely nothing at all. 30 minutes straight, this fragile boy rests his weight against her knee, barely breathing. By their 7th session, Savannah introduces kinetic sand. Mesmerized, Leo buries his small hands in it. Slowly, he shapes one large circle, and a tiny one right beside it. Savannah reads the agonizing metaphor. Instantly, the large circle is his lost mother, and the small one is him. She does not intrude. Instead, she quietly shapes a 3rd circle, placing it at a safe distance. She is silently promising him that she is there in the dark, but will never force his door open. Think about that for a moment. Simply respecting a broken heart's boundaries can completely change a life. Leo stares at her circle. He does not pull it closer, but he does not crush it either. the shadowy hallway, the feared Mafia boss Dominic stands as still as a statue. His enforcer Frankie steps up, whispering that the Don has been frozen there for an hour. Dominic does not blink. His eyes stay locked on the door as he makes a heartbreaking confession. For 2 long years, he has not been able to stand near his own flesh and blood without the boy spiraling into pure terror. By the 10th session, Savannah sits on the floor, humming a mournful tune. Halfway through the hour, a tiny, fragile sound rises to meet hers. Leo is humming back, matching her pitch perfectly. Savannah keeps her hands completely steady, pretending the world has not just shifted on its axis. Love often requires us to hide our biggest victories so others can finally feel safe. The instant that heavy door clicks shut, Savannah collapses against the cold hallway wall. She buries her face in her hands and weeps in total silence, terrified the boy might hear her breaking apart. That specific melody was the exact tune her late brother used to sing before her own world went dark. You and I both know this undeniable truth. The people who carry the deepest emotional scars are usually the ones holding the bandages for everyone else. She dries her eyes, forces a warm smile, and walks right back into the fire. By session 12, the emotional wall finally cracks. Leo stands up, crosses the room, and takes her hand. He pulls her to the window to look at a pigeon. Savannah whispers the word, and slowly the boy mouths it perfectly back to her. Savannah is practically vibrating with hope because the boy finally formed a word, but she carefully masks her joy while waiting for the elevator. Suddenly, the heavy, sweet door swings wide. Camila, the Mafia boss' bitter girlfriend, steps out with a perfectly crafted smile and practically forces a cold glass of fresh juice into Savannah's hand. This is exactly why you have to watch your back when a jealous soul offers you a sweet drink. Luckily, Maggie, the sharp-eyed veteran maid, marches down the hall just in time. She boldly announces that Savannah has an urgent call at the front desk, allowing her to leave the untouched drink and escape. Always pay respect to the quiet workers who fade into the background. They are the ones who see every single hidden shadow in the building. As the elevator doors slide shut, Maggie stares straight ahead and drops a terrifying piece of truth. She whispers that Camila had been lurking outside the boys' room for 20 minutes like a vengeful ghost. Savannah feels her blood run cold, but the veteran maid urges her to stay alert. Upstairs, the charming mask finally slips from Camila's face. Boiling with rage, she storms over and pours the tainted juice into a potted white orchid. She had laced that drink with enough heavy sedatives to trap Savannah in bed for days. Her cruel logic was simple: break the routine, keep the new teacher away, and let the vulnerable boy forget her entirely. Bitter jealousy always twists people into doing horrible things. True malice usually grows from the soil of a deeply hollow heart. Camila shatters an empty glass against the counter and pulls out a burner phone. Her quiet poison trick fell apart because of one sharp-eyed maid, leaving Savannah free to return to the penthouse every single day. She is completely unbothered, pouring her heart into the boy. Then Wednesday hits. Dominic, the untouchable king of the city, pulls up to his high-rise hours early. He abandons a massive sit-down with Tribeca bosses and walks away from millions at the docks, leaving his terrified crew standing in the dust. You see, it reminds us of a fundamental truth we all must face. No matter how much money or power sits on the table, life will eventually demand that you drop absolutely everything to show up for the people you truly love. The kingpin rides his elevator in isolation. Stepping into the penthouse, he stops dead at the archway, instantly stripped of his authority by the scene on the floor. Savannah sits barefoot, calmly shaping sand. Beside her, pressing his small shoulder to hers, is Leo. He is not hiding or shaking. He is just rolling out a ribbon of sand. Then the impossible happens. A hesitant curve pulls at the corner of the boy's mouth, a genuine smile. The hardened criminal stands completely frozen, terrified that breathing too loud might shatter the peace. Savannah lifts her head, her calm eyes locking onto his shadowed figure. It reminds us that beautiful moments are incredibly fragile, and sometimes we just have to stand back and let them exist. Dominic gives her the slightest shake of his head, a silent plea begging her not to break the delicate spell. The boss sinks into a leather chair, remaining perfectly still for 20 minutes. He watches his wounded boy and studies the quiet woman who breathed life back into his home. When the child finally sleeps, Savannah carefully drapes a blanket over him. Only then does Dominic step forward. He guides her onto the freezing balcony as the city lights bleed into the dark sky. Out in the cold, the most feared man in the city picks up a pot and pours her coffee himself. It is an image that teaches us a vital lesson. True power is never about ruling with fear or brute force. Genuine strength is having the humility to quietly serve someone who helped you. Makes the coffee black, bitter, and sharp. Dominic silently respects the choice. Leaning against the railing, he confesses that a stranger accomplished what he could not. Savannah refuses to let him drown in pity. She reveals the boy actually tracks his father's every footstep through the halls. She explains that traumatized children do not lack emotion. They simply speak a language the world refuses to learn. When asked how she knows, she speaks of her brother. Gone at 10 and the crushing guilt she carries, Dominic offers no cheap sympathy. He simply admits his wife was taken 2 years ago. You and I have probably seen this truth in our own lives. Deep unspoken pain always recognizes its own reflection. And we often find our deepest bonds in the sorrow we share. Wind rips around them as Dominic stares into the dark. He admits he was not watching his wife closely enough that day. They stand as two haunted people, sharing the burden of survival. Then he unearths his nightmare. 2 summers ago, a rival crew lit up their car. Elena shoved their son to the floorboards, taking the fatal bullet. The boy was trapped beneath her when she stopped breathing. Savannah places her cup down as the tragic puzzle clicks together. She looks this dangerous man in the eye and declares his son is not broken. He chose silence. The last time the child raised his voice, his mother bled out. It teaches us a grim truth about the mind. Trauma is a brutal architect, forcing us to build desperate, silent walls just to survive the unimaginable. Her voice trembles as she paints the devastating picture. Little Leo likely screamed for his mother as the glass rained down in his traumatized mind. Making a sound became the trigger that killed the woman he loved. Dominic freezes. His heavy palm slams the metal table, eyes red with a father's pure agony. He dragged his son to 7 elite doctors, and every expert missed this truth. Savannah tries to soften the blow, whispering she is no professional. But the Don feels the truth of her words echoing in his marrow. They stay on that freezing balcony for hours, letting their coffee turn to ice. It leaves us with a powerful truth sometimes. It takes the compassionate eyes of a stranger to uncover the difficult answers we cannot bear to face ourselves. Look closely at this moment. Savannah steps into the elevator, and Dominic escorts her with perfect manners. But the second those doors shut, the mask crumbles. He drifts to the balcony. Eyes locked on the glittering neon cityscape, an electric beast that has slowly chewed away his humanity. Frankie, his loyal shadow, steps up softly to ask if he is holding together. Dominic does not look away from the void. He simply asks if a genuinely good soul can breathe in this twisted reality. Frankie just freezes. 3 generations of serving this bloodline, and no boss has ever spoken with such fatal doubt. From the darkened corner, Camila watches this fracture happen in real time. And here is a simple truth. We all must face a guilty. Conscience will always bleed through the cracks, no matter how thick the armor you wear. Stick with me here, because we're watching the psychological tension reach a breaking point. Over the next 10 days, the Mafia boss completely fractures his usual habits. Instead of vanishing into the night, he is walking through the front door at 5. He skips a massive gala. He even takes his private syndicate calls in the kitchen, just so his eyes never leave the hallway. Camila slinks downstairs in a backless dress with 2 glasses of expensive wine, but he barely gives her a glance. She has never felt a freeze like this. Panic sets in. Snapping into survival mode, she orchestrates a fake Sunday dinner, cornering Savannah and demanding she stay. The lesson here is simple. When someone who despises you suddenly pretends to be your closest friend, you do not politely decline. You turn and run the other way. Camila turns up the artificial sweetness, practically begging Savannah to sit down for dinner. But Savannah possesses the sharp instincts of a survivor. She drops a perfectly polite, freezing cold rejection, claiming she has a shift downstairs at 6. The elevator doors slide shut right on Camila and her burning fury. Just 2 days later, a mysterious fancy gift bag appears in the staff room. Inside sits a gorgeous camel coat from an upscale boutique, completely unearned. A sticky note claims it simply did not fit Camila anymore. When Maggie warns her the jacket costs over $1,000, Savannah instantly smells the trap. She shoves that heavy coat deep into the dark corners of her metal locker. It is a harsh but necessary life lesson. Never accept expensive gifts when the strings attached are only meant to choke you. That $1,000 coat was a Trojan horse, hiding a listening device stitched deeply into the silk lining. Because Savannah locked it away, the bug captured nothing but the hollow, echoing darkness of a metal locker for 9 straight days. Camila is boiling over, crossing the line into outright crime. She tracks down a hotel technician drowning in gambling debt, a sliding $4,000 across the table. His only job is to change Savannah's schedule, sending her down to the windowless basement storage on sublevel 2. No security cameras, no witnesses. Following her fake orders, Savannah heads down at 3. As she unlocks the heavy door, the sound of boots stops right behind her. A massive man blocks her only exit. It is a terrifying reality to face. Money can buy a lot of awful things, but it can never buy a clean conscience. I are going to unpack this tense moment together. Savannah tries to play it cool, stating she needs to return to the lobby, but the man takes a deliberate step forward, forcing her backward into the suffocating dark of the storage room. She hears the terrifying, metallic click of the lock. Upstairs, Frankie is running his digital sweep. He spots Savannah's access card hitting the basement at 3 in the afternoon, and his instincts scream that something is wrong. He instantly calls the boss. Dominic is inside that elevator in under 40 seconds. He does not gather his crew. He does not even reach for a weapon. He stalks down that concrete hall like a shadow, closing the final gap so silently the predator never hears him coming. Remember this: true loyalty is never just an empty promise. Genuine loyalty is an undeniable action. Strikes the man exactly one time when Dominic channels that kind of quiet, lethal fury. A single punch is all it takes. The attacker folds instantly, crashing into a pile of buckets, completely unconscious. Savannah stands terrified, pinned against the cold metal shelves, gasping for air. Dominic ignores the man on the floor. He locks his dark eyes on hers, his voice dropping to a gentle whisper as he asks if she is hurt. When she shakes her head, he guides her out a hidden exit and into an armored truck, speeding onto Lexington Avenue. Savannah is panicking, swearing she has to quit because someone is actively hunting her. Dominic stares at the dark road ahead, his voice dead calm as he agrees. Someone really wants her gone. It proves a strange truth about life. Sometimes the safest place is the very last place you ever expected. John is finally putting the twisted puzzle pieces together. He tells Savannah the hit was an inside job, but he knows she is innocent. How, on her very first day, she was the only person who did not stare at the weapon hidden beneath his desk. Her pure ignorance of his violent world makes her entirely different. The boss personally drives her back to Queens, quietly absorbing her harsh reality. He studies the smashed mailboxes, the sketchy street corners, and the heavy deadbolts she relies on. He does not say a single word. He just parks his truck and sits in the pitch black until her apartment light finally flicks on. Here is a simple life lesson. Sometimes the loudest way to show you care is just making sure someone gets home safely. The second that warm light hits the glass, he picks up his phone to make a call. Sitting in the dark, he calls his enforcer Frankie with a strict order to double Savannah's security, keeping it entirely invisible. Then comes the massive shift in the syndicate. He orders a full investigation into his own inner circle. He tells Frankie to look at everyone, especially his girlfriend, Camila. Frankie is stunned, but Dominic recognizes the destructive poison of toxic jealousy. Meanwhile, up in the luxury penthouse, Camila is slowly losing her mind. After waiting 2 agonizing hours, the boss has entirely ghosted her. In a fit of rage, she hurls a full crystal glass of red wine straight into the roaring fireplace. It is a brutal life lesson. You can never force someone to value you, no matter how beautifully you dress up the illusion. Her eyes go completely dead as she grabs her secret burner phone, ready to unleash absolute chaos. The sun is barely up the next morning, but Dominic is already waiting in the break room, gripping a folded piece of paper. He offers Savannah a free luxury apartment in Brooklyn Heights, complete with around-the-clock Mafia security. But Savannah refuses to play that game. She slides that paper right back across the table, flat out rejecting the most dangerous man in the city. She warns him that accepting his apartment crosses a permanent, undeniable line. She absolutely refuses to become a kept woman. Dominic does not even try to argue deep down. He expected exactly this kind of fierce self-respect from her. He just nods slowly, asking her to accept his invisible protection instead. We should all take this life lesson to heart. Never compromise your true independence just for a sense of safety. Keep your boundaries firm, even when someone powerful offers you the world. Knowing the dangers of her sketchy neighborhood, she finally agrees to the hidden bodyguards, as long as they remain ghosts. Fast forward to week 4, and little Leo is making beautiful, quiet progress. He grabs a thick notepad as Savannah hands over a box of wax crayons. He immediately digs out the blue one he secretly swiped from her bag weeks ago. With careful, deliberate hands, he draws his family. A tall man, a blonde woman, a little boy holding her hand. It is a portrait of his father and his late mother. But then, a heavy emotional pause fills the room. Right there in the blank space next to his own tiny figure, the child begins drawing a fourth person. The air in the room just stops. The life lesson here is profoundly simple. True family is never just about who shares your blood. It is about the rare people who actually put in the time to stand by you in the dark. The fourth figure on that crinkled paper is a woman with brown hair. Interestingly, she is not drawn next to the towering father. She is planted right by Leo's side. Savannah stares at the waxy drawing, her throat tight as she fights back a waterfall of tears. He did not try to replace his dead mother with her. He simply made her his best friend. There is a beautiful life lesson hidden in that crayon sketch. You never have to erase someone's painful past to become a deeply meaningful part of their future. Savannah gently kisses his blue crayon and hands it right back. By Thursday, the emotional weight shifts again. She brings out a tiny clay flute, a family heirloom carrying its own silent ghosts, untouched for 11 years. Sitting on the rug, she breathes out 3 simple calming notes. The little boy completely freezes. The suspense is heavy then. He slowly creeps toward her. Let's watch how this delicate moment unfolds. Leo shuffles across the rug, pressing his small frame against her side. He does not snatch the instrument. Instead, he flattens his palm against the clay, to feel the music vibrating against his skin then. Something miraculous happens. The silent kid opens his mouth and releases a steady hum, perfectly matching her note. It is a massive psychological breakthrough. Down the hallway, Dominic hears this absolutely impossible sound. He sprints around the corner but slams on the brakes at the doorway, utterly stunned. He looks like a deeply dangerous man terrified of cracking thin ice. When Leo hums the note again, the ruthless crime boss grips the wooden doorframe just to keep his knees from buckling. The life lesson here is undeniable. Genuine patience and kindness will always break down the heavy walls that fear and power could never touch. Long past midnight, and the penthouse air feels heavier than the sleeping city below. Savannah is quietly washing glasses at the sink when Dominic finally appears. The powerful man looks like a hollow ghost carrying the weight of the world as he pours a simple glass of water. Out of nowhere, his rough voice shatters the quiet. Today would have been his late wife's 39th birthday, but he does not stop at the grief. He confesses the brutal, bloody vengeance he carved through the underworld after she died, fully expecting Savannah to run away in terror. Instead, she just respectfully dries her hands. She looks at him and says that grief makes monsters of us all. But if you find just one pure reason to keep breathing, you can find your way back. You and I know the lesson here. We cannot judge the dark paths people walk in their blinding pain, as long as they choose to survive it. Let's unpack this scene together. Dominic drops his guard, his eyes heavy with the pain of 2 lost years where grief turned him into a ghost of a father. Savannah anchors him, reminding him that he has finally found his way back to his son. The kitchen grows deafeningly quiet, the air thick with a dangerous tension. He stares at her, stripping away all titles, and asks her to use his first name. Savannah immediately pulls back, walking away from the flame. Here is a lesson we all must learn. Never compromise your personal boundaries, no matter how magnetic the pull of danger might be. But in this world, shadows are always watching. 2 floors below, his partner Camila stares at this exact moment through a hidden lens, letting a toxic jealousy slowly rot her mind from the inside out. Consider the psychological decay happening here. Camila actually paid a nameless stranger to wire the entire penthouse with hidden lenses, feeding her deep-rooted paranoia. Sitting alone in the dark, she compulsively rewinds the footage. 3 separate times, she watches Dominic ask the housekeeper to use his real name. Her chest gives in, because she recognizes that raw, unguarded devotion in his eyes. It is the exact vulnerability he used to reserve for the wife he buried. Yet, sitting in the pitch black, Camila refuses to cry. This brings us to a harsh but necessary life lesson. The very moment you have to spy on your partner to feel secure, the relationship is already dead. Paranoia never actually protects you, it just turns your heart to stone, leaving behind a cold monster desperate for control. Camila chokes down her grief and lets pure vengeance take the wheel. She understands the stakes perfectly. If she physically harms Savannah, Dominic will absolutely burn the city to ash. So she opts for psychological warfare. Aiming to terrify the young woman into fleeing back to Ohio, she tracks down a desperate driver named Marlon, a man drowning in debt to street sharks, and wires him $3,000. She systematically manipulates the hotel network to ensure Marlon intercepts the ride request. It is a chilling display of cruelty. There is a vital life lesson woven into this malice. Toxic envy will inevitably turn you into the monster you fear most. Destroying an innocent person, simply to bandage your own shattered ego, is a one-way ticket to absolute destruction. The steel trap is finally set. Savannah slides into the back seat, completely unaware she is walking into a cage. As the neon city lights fade, she checks her phone, and a cold dread hits her stomach. They are miles off the route. She firmly asks the driver to pull over. But Marlon just stares dead ahead. The vehicle violently turns into a pitch-black alley behind an abandoned warehouse, and the doors lock with a sharp click. But Savannah is forged from absolute steel. After years of surviving hardships, she refuses to scream. She simply grips her keys tightly between her fingers. You need to remember this life lesson. Always stay sharp, and never let blinding panic rob you of your ability to survive. Just as the shadows close in, a black sedan violently swerves out of the darkness, aggressively flooding the alley with blinding headlights. Before Marlon can throw the car into reverse, a second vehicle seals the exit. Dominic's men had been watching her every move. 2 enforcers step into the light, shattering the driver's window into 1,000 pieces before he can even blink. The back door swings open to reveal Frankie, the boss loyal lieutenant. He softly drapes a heavy coat over Savannah's shaking shoulders, assuring her the dawn is on his way. 12 minutes later, Dominic's tires screech across the pavement. He pulls her into the safety of his personal car. He never bothers to ask if she is hurt, because his sharp eyes have already mapped every inch of her. There is a profound life lesson here. True protectors do not waste breath on empty words. They let their swift actions do the heavy lifting when it truly matters. The engine roars as they tear down the desolate highway. The silence inside the cabin is suffocating until Dominic shatters it. His voice is cold steel. He demands to know if she suspects someone in his syndicate orchestrated the trap. Savannah hesitates, agonizing over condemning another woman based on a feeling. Eventually, she quietly breathes Camila's name, explaining the twisted, jealous glare she noticed earlier. When Dominic asks why she kept this dangerous secret to herself, her response holds a profound life lesson about respect. She says she had no right to accuse his family, refusing to make him choose between his partner and a mere employee. That quiet, selfless maturity is exactly why this ruthless crime boss is slowly falling for her. She is genuinely different from everyone else in his dark, violent world. Dominic aggressively throws the car into park off the dark highway. He looks deeply into her eyes and drops a shattering confession. He never actually loved Camila. He admits she was merely a hollow distraction for public events, having felt no true affection since burying his wife. Savannah softly asks why he would allow a fake person near his traumatized little boy. Heavy regret washes over his face. He assumed the child just needed any mother figure, but now sees he needs a genuine soul. Take this simple life lesson to heart. You can never patch a deep wound by replacing real emotional superficial convenience. He outright refuses to take her home. Instead, he secures her in a heavily guarded luxury suite, stationing his best soldier next door. The underworld war has officially begun. Let us pause and look at the staggering contrast here. While Savannah begs for one last night in Queens to pack her modest life, Dominic steps into his silent penthouse. Camila is fast asleep, oblivious to the impending storm. He wakes her with a voice stripped of humanity, coldly demanding. She vanished from 48 hours. There are no screaming matches. He simply tosses a thick stack of cash and a one-way boarding pass onto the mattress. He admits he lacks hard proof, but he knows exactly what kind of snake is sharing his bed. Let me share a crucial life lesson with you. Always trust your instincts. When someone's energy feels broken, you do not need a confession to prove they are toxic. Protect your peace, cut the heavy cord, and lock the door behind them. Single heartbeat, the beautiful illusion shatters. Camila's innocent mask melts away, exposing the venom underneath. She loses control, screaming that he is throwing her away for a mere housekeeper. In a blind rage, she hurls a heavy glass lamp at his head. It explodes into 1,000 shards, but Dominic does not even blink. Absolute ice in his veins. She furiously packs her designer bags and storms out into the night. But here is the dangerous twist. She is not heading to the airport. The second her heels hit the pavement, she slides into a waiting town car and pulls out a hidden burner phone. Pay close attention to this simple life lesson. People will always reveal their true character the exact second they stop getting what they want. If you want to know who someone truly is, just watch how they handle rejection. Stick with me, because we are about to uncover what really went down in the past. The man on the other end of that burner phone is Camila's uncle, Victor Merrick, the phantom pulling every string born in every Europe and forged in the brutal streets of the Bronx. Victor is the architect of this tragedy. He runs a massive underground weapons syndicate and trusts absolutely no one. Here is the devastating truth. 2 agonizing years ago, Victor was the exact man who paid a sniper $28,000 to assassinate Dominic on the highway. As we peel back these bloody layers, remember this simple life lesson. Your most dangerous enemies are usually the ones operating quietly in the background. The loudest guy in the room is never your biggest problem. The real threat is always the quiet observer waiting patiently in the dark. Here is where the tragedy bleeds into pure madness. That hired sniper completely missed his target, and the bullet claimed the life of Dominic's beloved wife instead. The blinding grief instantly turned him into a force of vengeance. In just 9 days, Dominic burned 3 of Victor's warehouses to ash, destroying $11 million in product and burying 2 enforcers. But without hard proof linking Victor to the murder, the 2 syndicates locked into a brutal Cold War for 2 long years. Then, Victor played his darkest card, sending his own niece Camila to infiltrate the lonely penthouse. The ashes of this rivalry carry a heavy life lesson. Revenge is a relentless wildfire that burns everyone it touches. Obsessing over payback will only consume your entire world, leaving you standing in the ruins with empty hands. To the midnight hour of our story, we find ourselves in a damp, smoke-choked basement. Camila is backed into a dirty corner, shivering under the cold stare of Uncle Victor. For 8 long months, her only mission was to discover where Dominic hides his little boy. She failed completely. But cornered animals do desperate things. To save her own skin, she makes a sickening trade. She whispers a secret about Dominic's newly discovered vulnerability, a quiet, unassuming hotel housekeeper. It is a ruthless betrayal of a woman who has no idea she is in the crosshairs. There is a hard truth you need to walk away with tonight. Never place your trust in a person who is willing to throw an innocent soul to the wolves. If they can sell out a complete stranger without a second thought, they will eventually do the exact same thing to you. Camila hands over the blueprint to the fortress, emptying every secret she has. She tells Victor about the way Dominic looks at Savannah, the simple housekeeper, the exact same haunted way he used to look at his late wife. You and I can almost hear the cold gears turning inside Victor's mind as he crafts a nightmare. He plans to snatch the girl and the boy, baiting a deadly trap, knowing Dominic will walk in unarmed, just to keep them breathing. Victor then mercilessly mocks Camila, laughing at her desperate, pathetic jealousy over a maid. It brings us to a quiet realization. Jealousy does nothing but blind you to the larger board. While you are busy rotting away with envy over what someone else possesses, you leave your own life completely exposed to ruin. Meanwhile, back in the sprawling penthouse, the sheer gravity of betrayal sinks deep into the floorboards. Frankie, the fiercely loyal right-hand man, marches in with undeniable proof. He swept the dark corners of the apartment and pulled 3 hidden listening devices. Worse still, the old access logs reveal a devastating truth. Camila is not just a spy, she shares Victor's blood. Dominic slams his heavy fist onto the mahogany desk, shaking the glass until it fractures into pieces. Imagine the psychological horror of realizing the monster you hunted for 2 years was sleeping in your own bed. It is a terrifying wake-up call. Keep your inner circle incredibly tight, and always verify the souls you welcome into your sanctuary. The deadliest blades usually strike from the inside. The realization tears Dominic apart from the inside out. The vile thought that he let a cartel spy breathe the same air as his fragile son for 8 long months makes his blood run ice cold. He kicks his chair back so violently it fractures the drywall. Barking orders at Frankie to triple the security detail on Savannah, he demands she be locked away in the safe house tonight. And down below, 38 floors beneath this brewing war, Savannah is just folding a tiny paper pigeon, completely unaware of the shadow falling over her life. It is a haunting image that leaves us with a heavy lesson. Ignorance might feel peaceful for a fleeting moment, but staying blind to your surroundings can be fatal when the wolves are already at the door. Let's look closely at the tragic contrast of this moment. Savannah sits in the quiet warmth of her room, pouring her gentle soul into a folded paper pigeon, praying it will help little Leo find his voice. She rests the tiny bird on her nightstand. Entirely blind to the hurricane forming just out of view, she cannot see the ruthless hit squad moving through the city, or the black sedan idling by the staff exit. She is just a good woman caught in the crosshairs of a generational war. Let this settle deep in your mind tonight. No matter how pure your heart is, you can still find yourself swept up in the destructive wake of others. You must always stay alert and fiercely protect your own peace. because the storm does not care if you are innocent. Nick does not hesitate for a single heartbeat. At 7 in the morning, he forces her door open, skipping the gentle romance entirely. He drops a heavy classified file right into her lap and shatters her reality. He tells her the brutal truth. Camila belongs to the very cartel that murdered his wife, and now Savannah is marked because she dared to care for him. He pulls rank, commanding her to move to the underground safe house without a single argument. When she stammers about losing her job, he silences her with forced, fully paid leave. It is heavy-handed, but it carries a truth we all face eventually. Sometimes the universe brutally rips you from your comfortable routines to shield you from dangers you cannot see. Learn to embrace the sudden, uncomfortable shifts. Anna absorbs this earth-shattering blow with incredible grace. She just asks for one simple heartbreaking favor. She must visit her old apartment to save a tin box holding the final memories of her late brother. Frankie offers to drive her, but Dominic is consumed by protective terror and refuses to let her out of his sight. By 5 in the evening, their armored car idles on a forgotten street corner. She runs inside and returns clutching a worn canvas bag, holding only a frayed notebook and a simple cloth rabbit. Listen to me on this one. Never lose sight of your roots, even when the world spins entirely out of control. The humble, quiet things that anchor your soul will always matter so much more than whatever sits in your bank account. This is the exact moment the fragile peace shatters. Savannah steps onto the cracked pavement just as Dominic opens the heavy metal door, and the quiet street explodes into absolute chaos. 2 dark sedans violently screech around the corner, barricading them in. 4 masked men pour out, guns raised before the tires even stop smoking. Frankie screams a warning over the deafening crack of gunfire shattering the glass around them. Innocent bystanders dive into the dirt, crying out in sheer terror. Without a second thought, Dominic violently pulls Savannah down behind the massive steel frame of the engine block. It is a terrifying scene that proves a vital point. True leaders do not freeze when the fire starts. They step directly into the line of danger to shield the vulnerable. Real danger is completely invisible from the ground. 4 stories above the panic, a hidden sniper is tracking their frantic movements from a rooftop. Dominic catches a tiny, lethal flash of light, and his instincts take over entirely. He throws his shoulders directly into the path of the bullet, taking the devastating impact meant for Savannah, the heavy round tears through his flesh, dropping him instantly to the cold pavement. Savannah does not even understand what has happened until the crushing weight of this unstoppable man falls onto her trembling hands. Here is a profound truth that cuts straight to the bone. Real love is never found in grand gestures or empty words. It is measured entirely by what you are willing to sacrifice when everything falls apart. Panic inside the escaping vehicle is suffocating. Savannah lets out an agonizing scream as Frankie guns down the last attacker, forcing the remaining cowards to flee into the shadows. They haul Dominic into the back seat, tearing through the city at 80 miles an hour toward a hidden clinic. Savannah presses her shaking hands against his torn chest, her clothes painted a tragic red. Through choked sobs, she begs him to tell her why he would trade his empire for a nobody. Dominic forces his eyes open, fading fast, and whispers his truth. He tells her she is not just a housekeeper anymore. Remember this lesson as you walk your own path. Your job title will never define your worth. The way you touch the hearts of others is what truly makes you irreplaceable. Stick with me here, because the emotional weight of this moment is unbearable. Savannah weeps softly, pleading with Dominic to keep breathing. He manages a weak smile and confesses his late wife said those exact same words before she passed. But Savannah refuses to let him fade, demanding he survive for his little boy. Her voice breaks as she finally admits she needs him, too, just before he slips into unconsciousness in her arms. What follows are 3 hours of agonizing surgery, where a single millimeter separates life and death. He survives, but Savannah is left entirely hollow. She sits in the sterile hallway, her ruined clothes stiff with dried blood, staring at the floor in silent shock. It is a grim reminder that survival itself often leaves the deepest scars. The heavy silence breaks when Frankie steps into the grim hospital corridor. He drapes his coat over Savannah's trembling shoulders and shares a secret that changes everything. 2 weeks ago, for the first time in years, the boss finally wanted to build a future instead of chasing ghosts. The reason for his sudden hope was entirely her. Hearing this tears down the final wall around Savannah's heart. 18 agonizing hours later, Dominic opens his eyes in the dim recovery room. He turns his heavy head, and there she is, Savannah is asleep in a stiff plastic chair, still wearing her blood-stained clothes, refusing to abandon him. Here is a truth we all need to hear. The people who refuse to leave your darkest hour are the only ones who deserve to stand with you in the light. For this quiet scene, the room is still, save for the steady hum of medical machines. Savannah sat through 3 shifts of nurses, ignoring her own exhaustion to keep watch. Dominic sees her fatigue and stays perfectly silent, giving her a rare moment of peace. You and I know that sometimes the deepest form of care is simply asking for nothing at all. By morning, they move him to a room bathed in sunlight. Just past noon, Frankie walks in with little Leo. Savannah is at the sink, obsessively scrubbing dried blood from her nails. She hears those tiny footsteps and turns, but Leo walks right past her. He climbs onto the uninjured side of the bed and places his small hand gently over his father's. It is a profoundly heavy, silent moment that completely anchors this fractured family. Leo remains silent, but heavy tears finally spill over his dark lashes. For the first time in 2 agonizing years, this traumatized child allows himself to openly weep. Dominic wraps his uninjured arm around the boy, giving him a safe space to pour out all that suffocating pain. It reminds us that true healing often begins the exact moment we stop pretending to be unbreakable. Savannah hovers by the door, feeling like an intruder on sacred ground. But Dominic catches her eye and nods for her to step forward. Then, something profoundly beautiful unfolds. The boy turns his head, meets Savannah's gaze, and gently pushes against his father's chest, silently telling the crime boss to make space. Dominic shifts over, and Savannah takes her place right there beside them. Let us look closely at this next moment together. Little Leo reaches out, taking Savannah's hand in his father's hand, firmly pulling them together. An hour later, the boy is fast asleep right between them. When Savannah tries to slip away, Dominic stops her with a rough, desperate voice, asking her to stay. It shows us that the greatest courage we can ever muster is not fighting the world alone, but knowing exactly when to drop our heavy armor. The untouchable crime boss completely lowers his guard here. He confesses his feelings for her, while brutally admitting his reality is a waking death trap. He offers her a clean exit. If she needs to walk out and disappear to stay safe, he promises to let her go without a single fight. He offers to fund a safe life for her anywhere on the globe. Savannah grows silent before revealing a heavy piece of her broken past. She lost her brother because she looked away for 4 minutes, and she swore to never abandon someone she cares about again. Yet, she's terrified she is too soft for this ruthless mafia reality. Dominic holds her gaze and states that they will just have to change the world instead. Once his rival Merrick is destroyed, he plans to hand the syndicate over to Frankie. Seeking only peace for his new family, Savannah warns him that men in his position never get to retire smoothly, but nothing worth having comes without a steep price, a hard truth we must all accept. Dominic looks her dead in the eyes and shuts her doubts down, vowing to make it happen. Savannah looks down, and for the very first time, she takes the lead. She flips her palm and presses it firmly against his. She needs time to process this chaos, but she refuses to run away while Merrick is hunting them. She is staying for little Leo. And for herself, this teaches us a vital lesson. Sometimes you must choose your own happiness to truly support the people you love. Dominic closes his eyes as a profound wave of relief washes over his hardened features. Out in the dim hallway, Frankie stands watch. He observes the battered mob boss, the quiet kid, and the fierce woman holding their world together. Frankie has served 3 different crime lords, but he realizes the Don has finally found a real family. God help anyone stupid enough to take them away. Let us step into the shadows and examine the enemy camp together. Across town, in a damp basement, rival boss Victor Merrick unrolls a massive blueprint. His top assassin stands nearby, downing vodka with eyes as cold as winter. Merrick shares the bitter news that Dominic survived the hit. But does he back off? Not a chance. Extreme cruelty often targets the innocent, a dark reality of human nature. Merrick points at the map, declaring that if they cannot kill the Don, they will steal his little boy. 5 tense days pass. Dominic is trapped in a medical sling, his body heavy and stiff. He cannot drive a car or lift his left arm, but his right hand remains perfectly steady. He can still smoothly pull a trigger. And for a father driven by pure vengeance, that is all the power he will ever need. Meanwhile, Savannah and Leo are locked inside a Brooklyn safe house. This fortress is disguised as an elegant brownstone, equipped with a fake doorman and solid steel doors. Frankie refuses to take chances, putting 8 enforcers on a tight rotation with men in the lobby, on the roof, and 2 guards right inside the living room. On paper, it is an impenetrable fortress, but danger often strikes from within. reminding us that blind trust can be our greatest vulnerability. Merrick has been playing a quiet game. Months ago, he bought off one of Frankie's own trusted men. Enter Tony Russo, a low-level guard drowning in a crushing $10,000 gambling debt. He is utterly desperate, and now the rival mafia boss completely owns his soul. Because of the chaos, Tony slipped into the guard rotation without a proper background check. This proves a sobering point. When we act out of pure panic, we often overlook the vital details meant to protect us. It is the dead of night, and Tony is on kitchen duty. At 1 a.m, he pours coffee for the guards and stirs in a knockout powder. An hour later, both enforcers are completely passed out. Tony sits in the pitch black, listening to the soft breathing of little Leo sleeping down the hall. He is sweating bullets, consumed by fear as he waits. At exactly 3 a.m, his phone glows in the dark. The hit is on. Camila and 4 heavily armed shooters slip through the basement doors using a copied key, creeping across the floorboards like silent ghosts. Lobby guards are taken out with chemical rags before they even know what hit them. Up in the bedroom, Savannah hears something shift. Not a footstep, just a single heavy breath in the hallway. Protecting her brother for 11 years gave her superhuman instincts. Hardship is a brutal teacher, but it always prepares us for the moments that matter most. She bolts out of bed, flies across the hall, and bursts into Leo's room. The poor kid is sitting up, eyes wide with terror, as he clutches his stuffed rabbit. She scoops him up, pressing his face to her shoulder and begging him to stay silent. But just as she reaches the door, the hallway lights violently snap on. Camila is standing right there, flanked by 4 heavily armed shooters. Camila flashes an evil smirk, dismissing Savannah as a mere housekeeper, but Savannah does not flinch. She pushes Leo behind her back, shielding his body, and demands the assassin take her instead. This proves that true courage shines brightest in the dark, when we put another soul before our own safety. Camila lets out a twisted laugh, calling her a worthless pawn, and marches them downstairs with dark hoods shoved over their heads. You and I need to unpack this next part together. 23 minutes later, the traitor Tony sits on the floor, paralyzed by crushing guilt. He heard little Leo crying in the back of that getaway van. It was a heartbreaking sob that sounded exactly like his own young nephew. And that single terrible sound absolutely shatters his corrupted spirit. Tony might be a coward who sold out his crew, but even he draws the line at hurting children. It shows us that even in the most broken souls, a flicker of humanity can still survive. He snaps out of his panic, wakes the guards, and confesses everything, handing over the enemy's exact address. Frankie gets the intel and calls Dominic at 5:18 in the morning, dropping the bomb that Merrick took his family. Before the call ends, Dominic is out of bed. The injured boss uses his teeth and his one good hand to strap a weapon to his belt. Frankie begs to go instead, warning that his wounds are too fresh. But Dominic goes into absolute beast mode. He roars that they are his blood, and he is leading the charge himself. Meanwhile, Savannah is trapped on a freezing warehouse floor. Anna hugs Leo against the concrete, humming a soft melody, but the boy is shaking like a leaf. He opens his mouth, trying hard to speak. She whispers that she will never leave his side. Then, he forces out his second word ever. He whispers, "Sav." He is calling out to her. This proves that the family we earn is often stronger than the blood we inherit. She buries her face in his hair. Suddenly, the heavy metal door screeches open. Camila swaggers in, waving a pistol and mocking their bond, promising to end them before sunrise. But Savannah goes full mama bear. She shoves Leo behind her, stands tall, and looks the assassin dead in the eye. She tells her she is not a heartless monster like Merrick, and she will not shoot an innocent child. Shockingly, the cold assassin actually hesitates. Welcome back, night owls. Let us look at how this unfolds together. The silence of the city shatters. With a single rifle crack, the raid begins. Dominic Vasari, driven by a father's desperate madness, brings just 12 loyal men to a guaranteed war zone. 3 unmarked sedans and a rusted van creep toward a fortress on Doremus Avenue, hiding in the shadow of a dead refinery. Up front, Tony Russo grips the wheel, sweating cold, praying to do one right thing before his clock runs out. They kill the headlights outside the heavy rings of security. And here is a truth you should always hold on to. Never underestimate a man who has already lost his entire world. With brutal precision, Vasari's crew ghosts the outer perimeter in exactly 11 desperate seconds. Frankie and his crew shatter the loading bay doors, pouring into the space like ghosts before the guards can even inhale. Yet the cycle of violence is never a sterile operation. 2 of Dominic's men slam into the cold concrete, their stories ending right there. One leaves a wife to wake up to an empty bed, the other, a 5-year-old girl with a new school bag. Frankie steps over his fallen brothers, whispering their names into the thick sulphurous air. It is a harsh, brutal reality to swallow. Blind loyalty always cashes its checks in blood, and the indifferent streets will never shed a tear for those waiting by the window. The second wave pushes back fiercely, but Dominic just wades directly through the raining lead. Arm bound tight in a sling, he refuses to seek cover, dropping a hardened guard with 3 methodical shots. Your chair a little closer, because you and I need to unpack what happens in this corridor. The third ring is a suffocating, dimly lit tunnel. Waiting at the far end is Merrick, weapon raised. Wearing the hollow smile of a man who has already died inside, he tells Dominic he has counted the days for 2 long years, ever since the syndicate took his wife. Dominic shows 0 emotion. He simply stares through the gloom and reminds Merrick that he stole his son, meaning, all debts are settled tonight. Let that sit with you. Vengeance is a bitter, toxic poison that always burns both houses to ash. Merrick completely snaps. His first wild shot tears past Dominic's ear. Dominic replies with cold precision, dropping Merrick to one knee. But Merrick fires a desperate final round, slipping right under the armor plate, sending Dominic crashing against the brick. Dominic loses all feeling in his legs, sliding heavily down the rough brick wall. He fights to keep his vision clear, just long enough to see Frankie emerge from the shadows behind Merrick. There are no grand cinematic speeches here, no poetic final words. Frankie simply raises his weapon and ends the man who poisoned so many lives. 3 doors down that same hallway, the deafening boom of gunfire rattles the walls. Camila hears the violence creeping closer and completely unravels, her trembling fingers turning white around a heavy pistol. Savannah catches the absolute terror in her eyes. Without a second thought, she throws herself into the line of fire, wrapping her body around little Leo. This is the truth about real courage. It is not about lacking fear. It is about standing firm to protect the innocent, even when your own legs are giving out. Steel in Camila's hands vibrates with her panic. Savannah does not rush her. She takes one deliberate step forward, projecting a remarkable calm, and softly asks the girl to drop the weapon. The facade shatters. Camila breaks down completely, her voice fracturing as she screams that she surrendered her entire soul to this violent syndicate and has nothing left. Savannah meets her gaze steadily, telling her that her heart still beats, and that is enough to start over. This is a vital lesson. No matter how deep of a ditch you believe you have dug, your life maintains immense value the second you choose to drop the shovel. The dark anger evaporates from Camila's shoulders. She crumples onto the floor in heavy tears, the weapon sliding harmlessly away. Savannah kicks it clear, scoops Leo into her arms, and flees into the dark. The heavy door explodes open with a crash. Frankie sweeps the room, finger ready on the trigger, but Savannah screams for him to stop, begging him to spare the broken young woman on the floor. Frankie reads the room for one agonizing second, lowers his piece, and coldly binds Camila in cuffs. Savannah wastes no time. She carries Leo down the rusted stairwell into a loading bay, choking on the bitter scent of gunpowder. Then her eyes find Dominic. He is fading against the damp brickwork, pale as ash. Savannah crashes to her knees, screaming his name to keep him awake. His breath is shallow as he begs to see his son. She presses Leo against his uninjured side. The boy hides his face in the ruined coat and whispers a single word, Dad. Love is the final anchor we possess when the dark tries to pull us under. That simple word was only the 3rd time the boy had ever spoken aloud. The untouchable boss completely shatters. Dominic buries his face in his son's hair, letting raw tears wash away the blood on his jacket. Savannah weeps freely beside them. And even a hardened enforcer like Frankie has to turn toward the shadows to clear his own eyes. Sirens finally wail in the Bejatans, intentionally late. Frankie's cleanup crew has already dissolved into the night, leaving Merrick's brutal empire to rot. And what about Camila? Frankie made a calculated call to the authorities long before the raid. He swapped an execution for a federal kidnapping charge. It is a brilliant strategy to remember the sharpest leaders do not need to endlessly shed blood to win. They simply rewrite the board. She keeps her life, but the next 30 years belong to a concrete cell. While Camila adjusts to the reality of a prison block, Dominic is fighting a vicious battle for survival. He endures 2 brutal surgeries over 14 agonizing days, one stretching into a 5-hour ordeal. The bullet had shredded his side, leaving total ruin. A clandestine surgeon, scrubbing his blood from her hands in a stained basin, looks Frankie in the eye and admits she assumed the boss was already a corpse. But certain men simply refuse to quietly fade. for 3 long weeks in a private clinic. Dominic wrestles with suffocating pain. His body is a broken shell. Yet every morning at 7, Savannah arrives with fresh coffee. Every afternoon, his son leaves a folded paper bird on the nightstand. It is a beautiful, grounded truth. Genuine love from your family provides the miraculous strength needed to stare down the dark and survive. Stick with me here, because this is where the entire dynamic shifts. It happens on the 4th morning, when Savannah finally uses his real name in front of the soldiers, softly ordering him to rest his wounded arm. Frankie sits over by the window, focused on his newspaper, failing to hide a quiet, knowing smile. 10 days later, the real trial unfolds in the claustrophobic back room of a Mulberry Street joint. 11 hardened bosses sit around a table reeking of stale garlic and bleach, loaded weapons hidden under folded napkins. The tension is thick enough to cut. Dominic enters, his arm strapped tightly to his ribs, and completely alters the syndicate. He looks his generals in the eye and announces his resignation. Never forget this hard-earned lesson. Understanding exactly when to take off your heavy crown is the absolute most powerful move a king will ever make. Dominic keeps his tone perfectly level as he hands the syndicate over to Frankie. The cramped dining room drops 20 degrees. A massive captain at the far end slams his fist against the wood, growling that death is the only accepted plan in their business. Dominic calmly counters that his mind remains available, but his violent hands are permanently retired. His son comes first now then. A bitter lieutenant makes a fatal error, muttering a crude slur into his whiskey about Savannah. Shaking with the fresh agony of his torn side, Dominic slowly pushes himself out of his chair. His dark presence immediately suffocates the room. He coldly promises that they will address her with total respect, or they will swallow their own teeth. Keep this close to your heart. A real man will gladly burn his own empire to the ground to demand respect for the woman who saved his soul. He stands up slowly beside his former boss, raising a glass of amber liquor. He speaks like a warrior finalizing a sacred oath. He swears to strictly enforce the clean boundaries. Dominic nearly died for no drugs ruining the streets. Only disciplined business. He vows to protect the Vasari bloodline with his own life. 11 heavy glasses rise together into the cigar smoke. The era is officially dead. Hours later, resting in the quiet clinic, Savannah nervously asks if he is certain about this, since the Mafia was his entire identity. Dominic reaches across the sheets and takes her hand. He explains that the syndicate was his father's suffocating nightmare, and tonight, he chooses the light. We all need to remember this. You are never obligated to drink the poison your family pours for you. You always hold the pen to your own ending. The dust of war was finally settling. With Merrick buried, Dominic knew Frankie possessed the grit to handle the messy street politics. After 9 exhausting years of building a terrifying reputation, no rival family would be foolish enough to strike a Vasari who just wanted peace. Savannah sat faithfully by his bedside. Her voice barely broke a whisper as she asked what he really wanted from the rest of his days. Dominic pulled in a painful breath. He described a future that shattered her heart with its quiet simplicity. He wanted to walk his son to the school gates, sip morning coffee with the woman who saved him, and fall asleep without feeling for cold steel under the mattress. True wealth has absolutely nothing to do with power. It is simply the ability to feel safe inside your own home. Savannah let out a bright, genuine laugh, finally stepping out of the dark. You and I have walked through the darkest corners of this story together, but this is where the healing begins. Dominic slowly reached out his heavy hand and covered hers. He did not force the moment. He just desperately needed a human anchor. She did not pull away. They sat in peaceful silence for 20 straight minutes. Across the room, little Leo was fast asleep, his tiny fingers tightly clutching the first paper rabbit Savannah had made for him. Suddenly, a gentle nurse named Maggie stepped into the room with a warm, foil-wrapped bundle of homemade banana bread, baked fresh at dawn. A beautiful life lesson sits right here in this quiet space, the smallest. Unexpected acts of pure human kindness are exactly what it takes to rebuild a profoundly broken soul. He stood quietly by the door, studying the bruised man, the exhausted woman, and the sleeping little boy. After 35 years in those sterile halls, she had seen thousands of fractured families, but she gave a knowing nod. They were a real family now. 6 weeks later, Dominic walked out. But you and I know he did not return to a cold Manhattan penthouse. Instead, they pulled up to a cozy 3-story brownstone in Park Slope, framed by a red door and a golden maple. He used completely clean paperwork, so nobody could trace his ghost back to the Mafia. It teaches us a vital truth. You can absolutely rewrite your destiny, but only if you are willing to trade the heavy illusion of fake fit power for the quiet, unshakable foundation of lasting peace. Expect a heavy hitter like Dominic to hide out behind marble floors, but here is where the narrative flips on its head. The former crime boss chose a totally normal home, complete with crooked kitchen tiles and a faded wooden porch. But Savannah made the ultimate move. She completely refused to move in with him. Instead, she rented a tiny apartment right above a Brooklyn flower shop. She paid her rent with hard cash and put her own name on the doorbell. She looked the former Don right in the eyes and told him she was walking on her own 2 feet, refusing to step through the fancy doors he opened for her. Dominic merely nodded, his chest aching with a deep respect. The takeaway here is crucial for all of us. Never let anyone else hold the keys to your personal independence. The Don knew better than to push a woman rebuilding her own soul. Savannah kept up her fierce hustle, scrubbing hotel floors twice a week to guard her independence. But for the days she watched little Leo, Dominic drafted a completely legitimate contract with proper taxes and health benefits. And Leo was finally blooming. He was forming clear sentences and telling Savannah that he loved her. Folding paper rabbits every morning like a quiet survivor piecing his childhood back together. But old habits die hard. Dominic tried a classic Mafia flex, tossing out glossy brochures for elite private schools with heavy stone gates. It is a harsh reality check. Throwing endless piles of cold cash at a fractured family will never buy real, meaningful progress. Let us unpack this moment together. Savannah barely glanced at those glossy brochures before sliding them right off the table. She slapped down a form for a normal public school, insisting Leo needed to mix with everyday kids. Dominic bristled, boasting he could drop heavy cash for any elite academy. But Savannah delivered a devastating reality check. His son needed to learn survival in the real world, not hide away in a fragile bubble of untouchable wealth. The former boss just stared at her, deeply humbled, and silently signed his name. Soon after, Savannah enrolled in night school, paying her own way with student loans and tips. Genuine power is keeping your feet firmly planted on the dirt when everyone else is desperately trying to fly too high. When Dominic stumbled across her night school bill, the man was instantly triggered. He was a former boss who never heard the word no, demanding to pay the balance on the spot. But Savannah stood her ground. She told him she had to earn this degree herself, adding that he could never understand, because he never struggled for an honest thing in his life. Dominic was silenced as that heavy truth sank into his bones. Fast forward to a peaceful Sunday. Savannah was cooking her grandmother's lasagna, intentionally burning the edges, because that meant the kitchen was full of warm love. Little Leo took a massive bite, his eyes lighting up with joy. It beautifully proves that the absolute best things in life are the ones you slowly build from scratch with your own 2 hands. Dominic popped open a dusty bottle of red wine, stared at it like an old enemy, and poured himself a glass of pomegranate juice instead. 7 full weeks completely sober, that kind of quiet discipline fundamentally changes a man. Later on the back porch, little Leo was passed out in Savannah's lap, clutching a crumpled paper rabbit. Dominic finally got real. He confessed in a ragged voice that he had not proposed because he was terrified she would only say yes out of sheer obligation. Savannah looked up, her eyes soft in the dark. She told him she did not owe him a single thing. She just felt genuinely, deeply loved. True loyalty is never about keeping a tally or settling old debts. It is simply about showing up for someone when they desperately need you the most. They leaned in for their first real kiss. It was quiet and careful, the kind of kiss you only get when 2 bruised souls truly choose each other against all odds. But you and I cannot forget the villain lingering in the shadows. Cut to a freezing concrete cell in upstate New York. Kamala sat shivering behind iron bars, completely stripped of her high society glamour. She was hunched over, writing a desperate letter to her mother for the 3rd time. She finally broke down and admitted she was dead wrong. She confessed that chasing that toxic, flashy lifestyle was never worth betraying her own flesh and blood. Actions always carry brutal consequences. Sometimes a person has to lose absolutely everything to finally realize what actually mattered in the first place. Camila sat on that letter for 6 straight months before finding the guts to mail it, but facing your own demons is always the first step. You and I have watched this saga unfold, and the biggest twist is not some chaotic mafia shootout. It is the undeniable fact that you simply cannot buy genuine kindness. A folded paper rabbit and a steady heart can heal trauma that $1 million in cash could never touch. Finding someone who refuses to walk away when things get gritty is the rarest gift. The true heavy hitters in life do not wear tailored suits or run criminal empires. They wear faded name tags and hustle for $14 an hour. Always remember to value the quiet, everyday grinders, because they are the ones truly holding this broken world together. Everyday heroes sit on cold hospital floors, folding paper toys for kids who forgot how to smile. Look around your circle today. Who holds it down for you in the dark without ever asking for a payout? Go tell them you see their quiet hustle. If this emotional ride hit you right in the chest, hit that like button, share this with your crew, and subscribe so we can bring you more storylines every single day. Jump into the comments and tell us who your personal hero is. We read every single one, and your real stories might inspire our next upload. Wherever you are tuning in from tonight, stay safe, guard your peace fiercely, and never stop dropping a little bit of unexpected kindness into the world. You never know whose entire life you might be saving.
Savannah enters the story as a housekeeper. To many people in Dominic's world, that means she is invisible. She cleans rooms, pushes linen carts, wears a name tag, and earns an hourly wage. But the story quickly shows that her true value has nothing to do with her job title. She carries knowledge that powerful people do not have. She understands sensory overload. She understands silence. She understands how grief can shape a child's body and behavior. Most importantly, she knows how to care without needing applause. This is a meaningful lesson for society. We often judge people by wealth, position, education, or appearance. We assume that those with expensive degrees must know more than those doing humble work. But real wisdom is not always found in offices, titles, or luxury spaces. Sometimes it is found in people who have lived through pain and learned from it. Savannah's experience with her brother Thomas becomes the foundation of her compassion. She knows how to read hands, how to avoid overwhelming a sensitive child, and how to offer comfort without control. These skills are not listed on her name tag, but they are life-changing. The story asks us to look differently at the people around us. Housekeepers, caregivers, waitresses, nurses, cleaners, drivers, and quiet workers who keep the world functioning. Many of them carry unseen strength. Many have survived things we know nothing about. Many are capable of changing lives in ways that powerful people cannot. Savannah proves that dignity does not come from status. It comes from character, patience, and the way we treat those who cannot repay us. The educational message is simple. Never look down on someone because of their job. The person cleaning the room may be the one who understands the human heart better than anyone else in it.